Welcome to the sound of an uncertain future. I am Martin Rooke, PhD student researching risk reporting here in the UK, and this is the Risktopic Podcast, the show where we discuss hazards, dreads, and yes, you guessed it, risks in society. And believe me, by the end of this podcast, you are going to get just as sick of hearing the word risk as I am of saying it already. Sadly, there's no other way around it. I've tried. I've gone to thesaurus.com and I've looked for all the synonyms and other words that I could use instead of risk, and sadly, no, risk is the only one that we can use. But I suppose that does then beg the question, what do we mean by risk? And do you know what? We'll get there, ladies and gentlemen. We will get there. There's no point jumping the gun. When I say risk, you've already got an idea in your head of what we are talking about, and that's fine. I'm not going to sit here and read books to you, but we're going to start off with some good news this week, ladies and gentlemen. I know there's a lot of atrocities that one comes across opening up one's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you know. Everything that's going wrong with the world seems to be beamed directly into our social media accounts or on telly, and everyone seems to be outraged at things. And the good news is that in America, in 2016, there was more bottled water drunk than soft drinks. I know, I'm shocked. Bottled water sales grew by nearly 9% in 2016, reaching 12.8 billion gallons. Now, of course, that sounds like a lot, but in all honesty, if I can get my words out today, that means nothing to us over here in Europe. You know, we can't exactly visualize a gallon. So allow me to work through the numbers here with you, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll work out just how many liters of water that is. So 1 imperial gallon, 1 gallon American equals about 4.5 liters, which is roughly about 6 of those Evian bottles of water that you can buy from the shop. So a 6-pack of Evian is roughly equated to 1 gallon. So that would mean that in 2016, Americans drank 57.6 billion liters of water, and that is enough to fill up 23,040 Olympic-size swimming pools. And that is indeed a lot of water, ladies and gentlemen. But of course, when you are presented with data like that, it is relatively meaningless on its own. All we can say is that is a damn amount of water. So let's actually try and figure out just how much water that is per American. And to do that, we take our total volume of water, our 57.6 billion liters, and we divide that by the number of Americans there are. So that is about 360 million, give or take. You know, allow me some slippage. This is only the first episode of a podcast. And that works out roughly at about 160 liters per person in America for 2016. Or 213 bottles of Evian per year, or roughly half a litre of water a day. Half a litre of bottled water, half a litre of Evian a day. Although I'm sure other brands are available. See, folks, isn't maths fun? And this is coming from someone who got a C at maths in GCSE, okay? So you might want to double check these numbers. I'm not saying that they're correct, but I do social science. But that aside out of the way, if we can say then that, you know, there's 39 gallons of bottled water per American, that is compared to the 38.5 gallons of soda that the average American consumes per year. So although the difference is only slight, it is an only slight difference, it does seem to be demonstrating that there is a change in trend, in that people are tending to focus more on bottled water than they are on soda. And I know there's some Brits right now just grinding their teeth at me actually saying soda. I'm sorry, that's what's on the Business Insider webpage that I'm reading now. So you're going to have to stick with the Americanisms, guys. Sorry. I'm not saying that I'm literally reading this dead off of the website. It is framing the discussion, I guess you could say. But I guess the big question is, why then are Americans deciding to drink more water than soda? One of the things I noticed today was actually quite a good bit of marketing for a bottled water company. And it was aimed at parents who, you know, have kids. I can't remember the name of the brand, but the whole purpose of the advert was to get over this idea that kids need to find their thing, whether it's, you had one child actor dancing, another child actor playing with a model train set, and somehow their thing that they enjoy is elevated and they get better at it, gymnastics on the back of a horse, if they have this brand of bottled water. Or I guess you could also argue that the image that they're trying to portray is that by having bottled water, it is inherently better for you getting into the things that you want to get into. And I think it goes without saying that for sure, water is healthier than soda. I mean, even if you just want to focus on the pure sugar element of carbonated soft drinks, of soda, I mean, we know. I don't think it's scientifically controversial to state that a diet that has a ramped up sugar content, a prolonged high dosage of sugar over many years, does put one more at risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And when we consider the fact that the average bottle of cola, whether it be Coca-Cola, Pepsi Cola, or generic supermarket roller cola, has about 44 grams of sugar in it. Now again, let's put these numbers into perspective because they're all a bit abstract otherwise. Let's say Monday morning, first thing Monday morning, you go to your local supermarket and you pick yourself up one of those big kilo bags of sugar and a 2-litre bottle of Coke. And by the end of the day, you've drunk that bottle of Coke. And then Tuesday, you go back to the store and you buy yourself another 2-litre bottle of Coke, Pepsi, or supermarket non-branded roller cola. And you drink that 2-litre by the end of the day. Keep doing that until Friday. Okay, so you've had 5 2-litre bottles of Coke. After drinking all of that, you would have drunk the same sugar equivalent as that 1 kilo bag of sugar that you purchased on Monday. Now, there may be some of you sitting there and going, but man, I wouldn't do that. And congratulations, you wouldn't. But there are legit people out there who do. People who could just easily cane a 2-litre bottle of Coke like it's no one's business. And there are, of course, discussions around, are these sort of soft drinks, are these sort of sodas addictive or not? And do you know what? That's not a discussion we're going to have here today. But going back to the original question, why are Americans drinking less soda and more water? I think what we're seeing now is a vast proportion of Americans, and maybe this is even Western populations as a whole, I'm not too sure, but a vast number of Americans who are 50 and below, they have kids and they have parents and they're looking at their parents and they're seeing, higher rates of diabetes. If their parents don't have diabetes, then, their friends' parents have diabetes. And they're seeing kids with a very high risk of developing diabetes at a young age. Or they're seeing their own friends, starting to get worried. Maybe their vision's going a little bit, and maybe they're just filling in all the tick boxes of potentially having diabetes. And they're asking the question, do I just want to become another statistic, another diabetes statistic? I think they're finding that the answer is no, they don't. They're finding that if they maintain a healthier lifestyle, that it might filter down to their kids, that it might raise some other people up to try and emulate their own actions. Because at the end of the day, what we see is that people genuinely want to try and live for as long as possible. And there is such a massive push towards healthier living coming out of America at the moment. Yes, there probably is arguments that the whole thing might be a little bit too focused on vitamin regimes and stuff like that. But on the counter side, you do have people like Joe Rogan who sits there and says, let's just try and live a little bit healthier. Let's try and eat a little bit better. Let's try and do a little bit more exercise. I think Joe Rogan has popularized yoga like no one's business. He made it cool to do yoga. I know sure as hell I do yoga at the moment, and yeah, I've noticed that it has helped my body out. Stretching, the breathing especially, it helps with my asthma, those big lungfuls of good air in the morning. But that being said, moving away from London has helped my air, but now I'm going off on a tangent, so let's just bring it back a little bit. It almost seems as if the American population as a whole has decided to prioritize the purchasing and consumption of bottled water over soda and soft drinks. And the funny thing is, this was done without any form of real regulation. If anything, we could say, that there has been subsidization of corn in America. High fructose corn syrup is dead cheap in America. Soda is cheap in America. And yet, despite that, the American public has seen the health warnings, has seen the health promotion by celebrities, the people they follow, as well as their own friends and their own family, and they have elected to vote with their wallet for their health, basically. Now, of course, the big question is, what are the soda companies going to do? Are we going to see the dissolution of Coca-Cola and PepsiCo and stuff? No, of course not. They're just going to buy brands of bottled water. They're just going to advertise brands of bottled water. They're going to shift maybe some of that advertising monies that they have from their flagship products to promoting water. The same that what we saw with McDonald's in the early 2000s when their profits were being hit because people said, we want healthier food. And McDonald's went, okay, we'll start doing fruit and little fruit bags, and you can buy water with your Happy Meal if you want. You don't need to have a burger. So this is an interesting story. Obviously, it's an interesting story because I just presented it to you. I wouldn't have selected a boring story for you. But when we put this in the mechanics of the risk society that we live in, one that almost inevitably begins with people identifying a health problem, a problem that affects the kids more than anything, and they sort of say, we need to stop this, and there doesn't seem to be a way through it, and it almost always ends in regulation. The fact that there seems to have been a change in behaviour away from regulation and towards a sense of free market capitalism does strike me as refreshing, to say the least. Right, anyway, I'm going to pour myself a cup of tea. I'm going to move on to the second segment. Okay, so next up on the docket of discussion, I'd be remiss if I was doing a podcast on risk and I did not mention the tragic terrorist attack that took place in London a couple of weeks back. I've previously had discussion of this issue with students in the criminology class that I taught. And it tends to be that whenever tragic events like this happens, we as a society like to spend an awful load of time and energy debating the reasons why. And no one likes to look at how we respond. And if right now you're very, very, very interested in the reasons why, please, while I'm talking, feel free to bring up other tabs on your browser, or, if you're listening on a mobile device, feel free to do your own research into the reasons as to why. Like that can be your homework task for this week, because there were a few things that I observed that was very interesting to me as someone who's researching risk, especially in regards to the technology side of things. How we as a civilization, I guess you could say as a British community, how we communicated between one another that such a terrorist action took place. And I guess the most interesting thing was what we now consider to be a terrorist attack. And I'm not trying to take it away from the tragic number of lives that were lost, especially, the poor woman who was shunted over the bridge into the waters of the Thames below, and obviously the policeman who was attacked and killed. A personal friend of mine, his brother and sister, they are police officers. It very well could have been one of them who were attacked. But this doesn't deny the reality that every day in London and every day in big cities and every day across the UK, people are killed by car accidents, road traffic collisions. People are straight up murked by vehicles is what I'm getting at there, ladies and gentlemen. People are run down, and people are also attacked with weapons. They are stabbed with knives. They are killed. And the only way such a dreadful event gets amplified across the media, it seems to be, is that if the event can be twinned with some form of media value. And if you're interested, if what I've just said has pricked your ears and you've gone, you what, mate? I highly recommend you read the Wikipedia page, at least, on the social amplification of risk framework. And if you can get hold of it, there's a researcher, guys, by the name of Jenny Kitzinger, and she did a fantastic article in 1999 called Researching Risk and the Media. I think it's that. Hang on, let me have a look. Let me just shuffle through my page. This is the problem of being a PhD student. You know something somewhere, and there we go. Yeah, Researching Risk and the Media by Jenny Kitzinger in 1999. And the whole purpose of these works, and indeed my particular stream of research, is to identify the particular factors of a risk event, of something like the Westminster attack, and to try and understand the cultural resonance that it has that allows it to be amplified through various media channels, whether it is the BBC covering it as a terrorist attack, whether it is people sharing YouTube videos about it on social media. What is it, in essence, that makes us go, this is important? And this was, of course, the very thing that a journalist who goes by the name as Simon Jenkins, or is he a columnist, one of the two, but he was saying on BBC's Newsnight, that it's a matter of prominence within the news, and that by giving something like the Westminster attack this level of prominence, that it is glorifying terrorism, that you can, in essence, conduct an attack that isn't spectacular, that is a mundane crime, or a series of mundane crimes if you want, but it almost seems to be that so long as you're doing it possibly in the name of Islam, or it can be claimed to be for Islam, that you are given national and international prominence. And even then, a few days later in Islington, probably a good, 5 or so? No, that's a bit too much. 3 or so miles away from Westminster. I have Google open right now. I could just Google Maps that, but I didn't. But several miles away in Islington, there was a car accident where a car veered onto the pavement and smashed into several pedestrians. And the first question that people had was, is this terror related? So now we've gone and we've taken the car. For young people, it's a symbol of independence. For others, it's a symbol of being able to commute to work. And we have transformed that into a weapon through virtue of amplifying what Khalid Masood did. And I'm sorry, but if the aim of terrorists is to change how society works, then surely by reconceptualizing the car as a weapon, they have inevitably succeeded. But again, it might also be because of the actual location. It was Westminster. It was the Houses of Parliament. Several hundred years back, let's actually get me S's in the right place there, Martin. But several hundred years ago, Guy Fawkes came the closest to blowing up the Houses of Parliament that anyone's ever been. And every year, we as Brits, we celebrate that. Or we celebrate him being caught. I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. Yeah, those weirdos who enjoy putting on those V for Vendetta masks and standing around the streets like they're actually accomplishing something within society. How do you invoke societal change by doing nothing? But that's an aside. Was it the fact that Khalid Masood was so bold in what he did that we amplified his actions to national and international prominence? Then again, let's not forget the fact that a policeman died. And the media always seems to amplify attacks on police, or I guess you could say events where police are killed. Let's not forget that back in 2012, PC's Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone were killed in Manchester by a chap known as Dal Cregan in a gun and grenade attack. They were lured in and he shot and killed them and blew them up. And that was quite a bit of a media event that received national prominence when the Manchester Police, or the Greater Manchester Police, as well as other police districts, are they known as? I'm not too sure. But other areas of policing all consolidated together and stood in solidarity with the Greater Manchester Police and put their foot down that they were going to capture the person who killed 2 of their officers. And for some reason, the media does seem to get behind matters of police solidarity when police officers are killed. But what struck me as interesting in a personal sense was this new thing that Facebook had. It's probably been there for a while, and we've probably never had a need to see it down here in the southeast of England. But it was this I am safe notification. Rather than putting out a status sort of saying that, yes, I'm okay, you could just click a button and it would inform all of your friends that you are safe. Now, great idea for people who would be around Westminster. But again, I had people who weren't in Westminster. People who lived in sort of Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4, right out to Essex, stating that they were safe from this terrorist attack. And you sort of sit there and go, well, yeah, of course you was. You had no reason to be in Westminster on that date. And then what struck me as even funnier was that I had people who lived in the north of England and other areas outside London asking me if I was safe through this particular function. You know, you can actually request to see if people are safe. And it almost seems to be that actual geographical space was completely deconstructed. It didn't matter how far away I was from London. I haven't been living in London for well over a year now. Even when I was working in London and commuting into London from Essex, I was nowhere near Westminster. To be honest, the only times I've been to Westminster is to have a pint at the St. Stephen's pub outside Westminster. Just simply to go, I'm having a pint outside the Houses of Parliament. But it almost appeared that those who were amplifying the fact that they were safe, you know, amplifying the fact that they weren't involved in the craziness of that day, almost seemed to be enacting a ritual of defiance. A defiance of the terrorist activities. The same way that people do when they overlay like the French national flag on their profile in light of some of the terrorist attacks in France. Some people on Twitter, you know, they'd start up the pray for whatever city hashtag. And some people might laugh at that as being ridiculous and tacky, or if anything, just completely pointless. But the big question then becomes, what does one do? Someone who is geographically apart from the event. You know, there is physical space between the person and the event, yet the event seems to resonate with them on such a degree that they feel like they need to do something. And surely a small token, like setting a safe status, like changing a profile picture, like tweeting a hashtag, surely it could be argued that that is a little bit more of a constructive use of energy in light of the futility of someone not being able to prevent something than sitting there and simmering on the emotional turmoil of not being able to stop a terrorist attack, or seeing these terrorist attacks and sitting there going, this should not exist in 2017, in the current year, potentially pushing that person down less constructive paths. Who knows? I'm just thinking to myself right now. But then, of course, if such a, I guess it's almost fair to say, muted terrorist attack, a less spectacular terrorist attack. I'm trying to find a word right here, ladies and gentlemen. I am struggling, that demonstrates the banality of this attack without removing the tragic loss of life from it. Because yes, there was death and it was tragic, but it's not as if it was on the scale of the IRA blowing up the BT Tower. It wasn't on the same scale as the 7/7 bombings. This was, in essence, an everyday tragedy that was amplified through being associated with terrorism. But if such a banal terrorist action can foster such a sense of consolidarity with London, a city that the rest of the UK does not like. Let's be honest, all right, guys? Not even Essex likes London, and Essex is on the border of London. But yet, why can we not use that sense of togetherness to actually tackle something that does take a lot more lives on a daily basis? Something like dangerous driving. Why is it that we have to wait for regulation and policing policy to come in to tackle things like texting while driving, driving drunk, driving under the influence of drugs? All states of being that have been statistically demonstrated to increase your risk of crashing your car, whether that is into another car or a bunch of pedestrians. But yet the day-to-day commonality of such deaths on the road are not amplified through the media. They are boring unless there is some spectacular pile-up on the M25. You don't hear about the daily deaths. And so we have to wait for the police to decide that they are going to arrest us and fine us and stuff like that for texting while driving and stuff like that. And sadly, it seems that social media seems to revolve around this same sense of spectacle, in that the common and the everyday tragedies of life are attenuated. They are just left by the wayside. Whereas the spectacular and the fun social campaigning causes, the ones that get you doing things and not so much thinking but just raising awareness, seems to be the things that receive prominence. You know, Coney 2012, the fantastic scam that was, comes to mind. But obviously I don't have all the answers to this. These are just my observations of this terrorist attack, and I'm sure I've upset people somewhere along the line. So if you want to reach out to me, you can do so on Twitter. That's Rooke Martin, ROOKE Martin. Let me see what you think. I'm going to make myself one more cup of tea. We're going to move on to the third segment, and then I'll leave you to the rest of your day. And I'm back. Got my cup of tea at hand. I've got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really digging loose leaf tea at the moment. I got myself a little metal teapot and little tea strainers and everything, and I'm so British that it hurts. It's actually quite painful. I make the Americans just die, ones that I chat to, especially when I tell them that I do fencing as well. They just can't believe it, and they sit there, they're like, "Oh, I bet you love the Queen," and I'm like, "Yeah, Lizzie's alright," and they just fall over. But anyway, I was looking through some articles on risk, because when you do a PhD, right, you get so interesting that you actually start reading things that are directly related to your field. So my Flipboard account, right, I've got stuff like public health, longevity, food safety, you know, stuff that makes me an absolutely cracking person to talk with in a pub. And I stumbled across one article today written by a Rebecca Hersher that simply says, "Do you zone out, procrastinate, might be adult ADHD?" And I'm sure I probably was doing something quite important, but my ADHD brain kicked in. I was like, "Nah, I got to read this." So here you are. Here are some questions to work out if you do indeed have adult onset ADHD, right? How often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they are speaking to you directly? And the sad truth is, ladies and gentlemen, that unless you're my supervisor, who will just simply be known as the professor from now on, yeah, I zone out. I've learned that sort of tragic smile and yeah, I have no idea what you just said, but I'm going to look interested whilst you talk to me, and I think about how butterflies get the patterns on their wings. Next question: how often do you leave your seat in meetings and other situations in which you are expected to remain seated? I don't like sitting. Like, if I can stand, I will. And again, that talks to the fact that sitting is being considered the new smoking. You know, there's research out there now that's sort of suggesting that a sedentary lifestyle, you know, spending a lot of time sitting at a desk or sitting down watching TV or whatever, is so bad for your health that it is as much of a health risk now as smoking was. So I try and get up and move as much as possible. I would happily stand for like 4 to 5 hours just at a bench working on my laptop. But again, that goes back to 5 years working retail, and there was no place to sit. You know, you had to actually be standing on the shop floor. But if I am if I'm in a meeting or something like that, like, no, I will sit, I will fidget like mad, but no one can see what I'm doing with my feet under the table. But, you know, I will stay seated because, you know, it's only polite, really, innit? It's like queuing in the bank. No one likes to queue, but you're gonna do it because it's what we do in polite society. Right, question 3. How often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing when you have time to yourself? First of all, right, I'm 25. Am I 25? No, I'm 26. Shit, I'm 26. There is no time to myself. I am 100% all systems go at all times, always. Like I was sitting there, even with the pressures of my PhD just bearing down on me, and I see a message from the president of the fencing club, because I do fencing, right? And she's like, okay, the nominations for new committee members are underway. These are the positions that are opening. You know, sign up for them if you want. I'm sitting there going, yeah, I could run for secretary. The back of my mind somewhere, you know, there's a little voice going, bruv, you are too busy right now. And I'm going, no, I can do it. I can make it. So I applied. I didn't get it. You know, it went to someone a lot more deserving than me. I purely applied for the fencing club secretary because I didn't think anyone else would. So, no, congrats to my opponent who bested me. We will settle this on the Ep1 at one day, because I'm sure as hell not doing Sabre. But I think the long and short of that is that I do not relax. There is no such thing as relaxation for me. Even when I sleep, you know, I sort of wake up at about 4 a.m. as you do when you sort of roll over, and I'm like, and I'm awake. Let's start thinking about some Heidegger and how I can incorporate that into my PhD. I'm like, oh no. Oh, I've only had like 3 hours sleep and I'm awake now, and this sucks. Right, next question. When you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentences of the people you are talking to before they can finish them themselves? Again, unless you're the professor. Actually, no, I've even done it to the professor. I'm terrible for it. It's one of those things, right? Having done English lit, you're like, yeah, I have a reasonably wide vocabulary, and people are talking to me. I'm like, I know what words you're going to use. And so I just throw it in there, and I'm terrible. And no one's told me to stop as of yet. So I'm just going to continue doing it until I really wind someone up. Next question. How often do you put things off until the last minute? Not so much now. Now that things are important and things are serious, not so much. I mean, I'm traveling up to London tomorrow to meet with a couple of curators for the British Library. I don't know what I'm going to talk to them about, but I'll work that out on the train. But no, when it comes to handing in and submitting, you know, work and things like that, actually organising my life now, I don't leave that to the last minute. But yeah, no, I was pretty bad for it when I was younger. Final question. How often do you depend on others to keep your life in order and attend to details? It's not so much keeping my life in order. It's more finding the things that I've put down. That's the thing that my partner's coming to realize now. If I can't find something within like an eye scan, the first person I'm going to come to is her. Yeah, she could still be asleep, and they just hear, babe, where'd I put? And she doesn't even wait for me to finish. She's like, I don't know, I'm asleep. I'm like, yeah, but you know, I thought you might have seen it last night. I'm terrible for that. Now then, I know what some of you might be sitting there thinking. You might be sitting there going, Martin, did you just do that thing where you try to self-diagnose off of the internet? Maybe that's definitely a possibility. You know, it almost seems to be a law of the internet that any sort of self-diagnosing results in cancer. But it is suggested that these 6 questions appear to have a sense of reliability behind them, and they screen specifically for ADHD in adults, as opposed to the myriad of other self-diagnosing questionnaires out there on the internet that are not standardized, that don't seem to come from any sort of medical or psychological backing. It's just what people make up. And again, there might be some more of you sitting there going, whoa, hang on, wait, why are we now looking for ADHD in adults? I thought it was a kid's disease. You know, children sort of grow out of ADHD. Well, there has been research out there that suggests that the prevalence of ADHD in adults might actually be higher than previously suggested. Back in 2006, it was believed to be about 4.4% of adults, whereas in research that was released this week, it seems to suggest about 8.6% of adults do have ADHD. Now, why is this a problem in adults? Because in kids it is suggested that ADHD could lead to inability to keep up in class, disruptive behavior within class. But in adults, it may be an underlying cause for people paying bills late, difficulty managing their day-to-day tasks, or, if they're running a business or something, which is what you can do as an adult, it might lead them to leave themselves in a financially compromised situation, having to file for bankruptcy. And yes, there may be a few perspectives out there sort of suggest that people lack discipline in their lives. And who knows, maybe undertaking a martial art or undertaking something like yoga, or just a disciplined activity outside of school, outside of institutional living, I guess you could say, that may go on to assist people with ADHD. But it does just generally seem to be that the treatment involves drug regimes and psychotherapy. And I guess the real question there is, to what degree does these treatments actually go on to treat the person, or are they just merely belaying the symptoms? They're just suppressing the symptoms. If we are going to focus more on adult onset ADHD, do we really need more adults to be dosed up to the gills? How many people are already on things like antidepressants, etc., within society? And of course, there is also a risk that things like Adderall, etc., may exacerbate the risk of heart disease or complications that come from high blood pressure. And I guess the big question is such drug regimes even necessary in such a technologically focused world where you don't need another person to keep your own schedule, when emails, calendars, notifications, all of these things are so hyper connected? Surely there should be some sort of focus on developing a kind of digital discipline which keeps you on time with the important things. And then, of course, the big question is, will there even be much of a shift to focus on adult onset ADHD? Especially considering the enormous pressures that things like the NHS are on at the moment. To what degree will people want to interact with the NHS in order to get a diagnosis of adult onset ADHD? How many doctors will actually read this report that states that, maybe adult onset ADHD is a little bit higher than we previously thought? And of course, there is always the argument of who is going to pay to treat those with ADHD. Is it even treatable in the sense that you will no longer be ADHD inclined? Or will it be a case that it would have to be managed? Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I glanced over the article, and I have to admit, the headline captivated me. And yes, it did a very good job of presenting these 6 questions to me in a way that made me question and indeed dread, do I have adult onset ADHD? I don't know, I might do. But then of course you've also got to marry that up with the effectiveness of, if someone who does have adult onset ADHD reads this article, how many people, if adults with ADHD are so terrible at maintaining their lives, how many of them are going to actually move forward and request meetings with their doctors and actually keep up the doctor's appointments? Too many questions, too little time to answer them. Anyway, this has been the Risktopic Podcast. I am Martin Rooke. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at RookeMartin, ROOKEMARTIN. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves, and you'll all be hearing from me again real soon.